about experiences with these guys. Well, we usually hear some bad experiences where somebody did something terrible to somebody when they were younger, and our heart goes out to people that's been through bad things like that. But that's not the story I want to tell. I want to tell about Billie Joe Daugherty, who's a hero of the faith and who had a church of some 20-something thousand people. Now his son Paul's the pastor. Sadly, he passed away in 2009, and as his wife said, the secret things belong to the Lord. It was hard for them to understand why he had to pass away in 2009, and he was only about my dad's age that my dad is now. He's a little older than my dad, about 5 or 6 years old, but he died in 2009. It was a big loss. But when I was going to Bible school, I went to 2 Bible schools. I went to Willie George School of Ministry, and I also went at night school to Daughtery Bible Institute. And I'm going to tell you something that I learned that to this day, I do it because of Billie Joe Daugherty. Not in tribute to his death. I'd done it from the time I saw him do it. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Here there is, the church of 20,000 people. And when he was done preaching on Sunday, and on Wednesday night, we probably had 5,000 or 6,000. And so let me tell you what we do after services. Pastor would stand up by the pulpit, and he would allow anybody that wanted to talk to him as long as they wanted to talk to him. And he wouldn't rush anybody. If they wanted to talk to him for 10 minutes, they get to talk to him for 10 minutes. It didn't make any difference. He would stand there and not move and talk to one after the other. And the line would be long, and it would take hours. Think about that. Every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, every Wednesday night. And he knew people by name. And I wanted to meet him really bad, so I just told him the truth, man. I just wanted to meet you, and he was so sweet and took his time with me, and it was like I was the only person in the room. Well, I didn't want to bother him, but I ended up doing it again later on a Wednesday night. Thought, well, maybe it'd be less crowded. It was still a pretty long wait, and I was the last one in line. And when I got up to him, and he named me by name, he said, "Hey, Chris, good to see you again. How's things in Alabama?" And I just couldn't believe it. I was like, wow. And he said, "Hey man, do you mind if we go sit down and talk? Because my legs they're killing me." And I said, "Yes, sir, absolutely. You've been here a long time, and you already preached, and you've been standing here talking to a lot of people." And so I just took my time to tell him what he meant to me, and that that my dad was a pastor, that I missed home and missed my family, and that I appreciated him, because the week before I had run into him in a pizza place, and here he is, a pastor of 20,000, and his ministry was worldwide, in Russia and all over the place, and he was on TBN, he was on national television, he was everywhere, his books were everywhere, and yet I came up to his table, and I saw them as a family. I saw their 4 kids, and the 2 of them, Paul was just a teenager at the time, and I myself was only 18, and I didn't have any money, but I went up and put $20 on their table and said, "Hey, I just want to pay for your food." And they said, "No, no, no." And I said, "Yes, let me bless you. I just want to bless you guys." Tell you, it brought me to tears. It reminded me of my family, my mom and dad, who were pastors, and their kids. And they said, "Come up and pull a seat up and sit with us and hang out." And I said, "Guys, there's nothing more I would rather do than do that." But I know how we always felt when people that we didn't know would sit down at our table, when I was a kid. And I want to respect your kids, and I want them to have time with you. I just want you to know I love you, and I want to bless you with this. And the next week, God blessed us by, not by them, but another person gave up and actually gave me the money that needed to pay for an entire semester at Daughtery Bible Institute. And I told his wife Sharon about it. She was a funny lady, and she didn't tell him that she just told him there was a testimony, but she didn't tell him it was a testimony about somebody that had given him money, and then someone from his staff had given me a big blessing to go to Bible school. And of course that looks bad, for him to call me up and then say, "Hey, if you give the pastor money, somebody on staff will give you money." And he thought it was she had just told him, "Hey, somebody sowed $20 and God blessed them by taking care of all their needs." And so he called me up, and he immediately knew my name again. "Hey, Chris." And then he said, "I hear you have a great testimony." And then I told him, "Hey, well, yeah, when I saw you guys at the pizza place and I gave the $20, the next week someone came to me that didn't know about me giving to you, and they took care of all my needs." And of course everybody shouted and clapped and everything. But then he whispered to me, and it taught me something about his personality and about what it means to be a man of God. He whispered to me and he said, "Chris, I want to apologize to you. Had I known this was about your personal gift to me, I would have never brought you in front of the people and try to make it look like that, we want people to give us personally money." and I wouldn't have put you on the spot like that, and I feel terrible. I just had gotten partial information from my wife, and I just want to apologize to you. And I said, Pastor, you don't need to apologize to me. It's totally okay. And then we had several more really cool connections, me and him. And then, which was just amazing to me. He was just a normal guy, and he acted like that. And he would talk to every person that wanted to be talked to. And then Willie George, who went to the main school. It was 5 days a week. It was 4 hours a day. And at the School of Ministry, I was a part of the very last School of Ministry in 1996 that they ever had. They did away with it, and they began to do traveling meetings and things like that afterwards. But I knew Whit, that's now the pastor there, played basketball with him every Sunday. I was invited to play basketball. I was a student, and found out that I could play some ball. So Pastor Willie invited me, but if you wasn't good, he didn't keep you long. And I made the cut, and I was one of the 15 that was allowed to play every single week the whole time I was in school there. And Willie George would pick me to play on his team every week. Guess what? He didn't like to lose, and we didn't lose much. And so he picked me every week, and unless he didn't win first pick, and Whit would pick me. Whit and Willie would go against each other, and I was either on Whit's team or Willie's team, but probably 80-90% of the time I was on Pastor Willie's team. And I was there when you hear the story about him shattering his arm and leg in a terrible act. I was there, and it was one of my best friends who's on my board who ran up underneath him and caused the accident. Actually, of course, they both see it differently. Willie George was pretty angry, and he threatened to expel him from the school. But he was just in pain later. He apologized, told him no big deal. But of course, Trent thought it was a fair move, and that he wasn't trying to take his legs out from under him. We just blamed it on him being old. Now I think we're older maybe than he was then. We thought he was an old man. I think he was just probably 40 or something, and we thought he was an old guy. But anyway, I cherished those moments, and one of the moments I cherished is, he was straightforward. I was a young preacher. I'd been preaching since I was 15, and this is the last part of my story. I was about 15, and Willie George was pastor of 20,000 people, and I felt honored that I got to spend every Sunday with him. But we didn't talk. Nobody really talked. We just played ball. And the losers sat out, and winners stayed on the court. So we were on there a lot. Sometimes we sat out a little bit, and every once in a while he would talk to me. But he was kind of a to himself kind of a guy. And I didn't bother him too much because my dad was that way, so I understood that. And so I kind of left him alone. But one day I embarrassed myself because I didn't want to preach at his church or anything, but I just wanted his approval. I just loved him and thought a lot of him. And I said, you've impacted me since I was a kid in the Gospel Bill shows and all that. Now I'm going to your school and playing basketball with you and all that. And I'd love to give you a tape of when I preached my first sermon in an adult church for my dad. And I don't know if you'd be willing to listen to it. And he looked at me and he said, Brother Chris, I'm just going to be straightforward with you. There's no way I'll listen to it. He said, I could be nice and I can tell you that I'm going to listen to it, but I'm just so busy, there's no chance. And man, it really offended me. Actually, he didn't call me Brother Chris. He didn't call me by my name. He would call me by a number that I wore every week. And I didn't even think he knew my name, and that offended me a little bit or hurt my feelings. And I thought, wow, he wouldn't even listen to a 30-40 minute message, by a young guy that looked up to him, And but later I understood, 20,000 people plus his internet ministry, his online ministry and his radio ministry and TV and everything else. He don't have time to listen to an 18-year-old message. But kudos. I went out there and tried. But what I'll say about that in closing is that later I actually left a little bit early, and I was gone for the whole holidays and everything. So I'd been gone for 4 weeks, I think, of basketball. And when I got back, he had really never spoken to me. We just played, but we high-fived, and he always picked me on his team, but we never really spoke other than that one time when I was embarrassed. And I asked him if he'd listen, and he said no. And so I didn't think he even knew my name. I didn't think he knew anything about me. And he said that when I got back, first thing he did, he came up and he said, "Hey, boy, come here and give me a hug." And gave me a hug, and he said, "Chris, how'd your trip to Alabama go?" Man, I couldn't have been more shocked. I didn't know he knew my name. I didn't know he knew I was going to Alabama. I didn't know any of that. but he had paid attention. He just was a quiet guy like my dad. And he asked me about my family. He asked me about the church my dad pastored, in Coleman. And he asked me, he knew where Coleman, Alabama was. He asked me about how things were going there. It was amazing. And then we sit there and we talk for 30 minutes. And actually something changed after that. And I don't know what it had to do with. I don't know if it was me trying to give him that tape, and then the disappointment in my face when he told me no. I think maybe he thought about that or something, and when he saw me next, he kind of made up from it by talking to me. And the rest of the time I was there, he and I talked like that in breaks. He would ask me about my life and things like that, and that was very special to me. And I appreciated that both those men of God, they didn't have anything. They didn't know who I was. They didn't know I would one day become a preacher. They didn't know that one day I would have 400 churches spread out over 11 nations and ministries in 15 nations. They didn't know I'd be preaching to crowds of 4,000 or 5,000 and 17,000, 18,000 and writing books that went out by the tens of thousands. And they just thought, here's an 18-year-old kid that's going to our school and is a wannabe. They didn't know any of that stuff, but they took time for me. And I appreciate them for that. So, this is one of them times we can tell a good story about a man of God that didn't do nothing wrong to me and to us, but both of them loved me and cared about me, learned my name. Billy George Daughtery learned my name really quick, but that was kind of more his gifting. Willie was more of a quiet guy, still is, and of course his son-in-law, his son and his daughter-in-law, not Gabe, that I did play ball with both of them. It is Gabe, actually, not Whit. Whit took over the church. Gabe is another son who's in his own ministry. He married someone who's very involved in our church in California, the craziest connection. And so now the Steinkes, as we call them, that's their last name, the Steinkes family, she married Gabe. And now they are looking to, they pastored in Pasadena for a little while, but they've visited Church 212 where my parents are a few times and got to know them. And it's just the coolest connection how things come around. And that's why, offended or not offended, be nice to people. You never know when you're going to meet them again and when you're going to need them in your life again. So hope you enjoyed that. It's informational. You can learn all about the times I'll be in Alabama and in California. You can learn all about the things we're doing with printing and sending out tens of thousands of books in multiple nations. All the stuff we've been doing with all the benevolence, and and just get an update on just everything that we've been doing. It's been pretty awesome. And then my sister's joining the ranks with us. She'll be coming back with us, and to live a life of giving, because it really is powerful. We make our living because we give and sow seed and continue to give, and God keeps giving back to us. And sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it's a little, but we are faithful with every dollar. So we use it to reach as many people as we possibly can. And we live off as little as we can. We're not telling missionaries, y'all got to do that. Y'all need to live poor. We live fine. We got all that we need, and we save a little bit of money. But we want to give to the mission field. That's what we want to do. That's why we're here. If we wanted to hoard up money, we'd do something different. We want to be givers and get it out there. So if you're giving to us, no matter how much, $25 a month or $1,000 a month, whatever it is, just know this: we need every penny of it, and we need it to increase by about 30% right now. And we need some extra giving. So if God calls you to do that, we're going to need about $25,000 to be coming home and traveling. I mean, the plane tickets and all that stuff has increased, and round trip for 4 of us all together. I don't know. It's going to end up, we bought only half of it because we didn't know what was going to go on with everything. But we're going to need $10,000 to $12,000. This is the right coach. That's something right there. Riding the worst possible coach, and it's still as high as that. Some $10,000 to $13,000 we're going to be paying for plane tickets, and then plus we're going to be renting some places and traveling a lot and things like that. And so I'm thinking we need to bring in about $20,000 for all of our costs. You got to get brand new visa costs and all kinds of stuff. But we have to come home. Our last daughter's graduating. My dad has been in not the greatest health, and we're going to go spend time with him and believe God with him. And so if God leads you to take care of part of this trip and sow towards it, go for it. If He doesn't lead you, don't do it, and don't worry about it. The Lord will provide all of our needs. He always has, and He always will. He's the source of everything we need. Hope you enjoy spending time with me. I sure did enjoy spending time with you. Love you guys. God bless.